So you mentioned Binance. Now, I think Binance is very interesting because don't they have the BNB token? Aren't they just issuing their own money? Like, isn't that very similar to what FTX did? And then, not to mention, we don't know. Like, they've been, it's been very hard. Binance hasn't showed their books since they last raised money. I think the last time they raised money was like in 2019, right?
Yeah.
So how would we know?
We don't know, and they do have a token. They're not, in theory, they could change. They are operating the validators, right? Like they could change the monetary policy. In theory, in practice, they have 60 to 70 estimated percent of all tokens of this $50 billion asset that they that definitely had an incentive to pump, and it's kind of wildly outperformed everything, even Bitcoin to the downside, which never happens. So there's questions, and I've rightfully brought them up, and people have said it's FUD or I'm delusional or whatever, and I'm just saying, like, hey guys, like, this thing's at a $50 billion market cap with it only trades on one place, and their assets and liabilities are a black book because they don't have to show you them, and they're saying, hey, here's a proof of assets report, and I'm like, assets don't matter at all. And it's really not enough to say, like, I trust your word for it. So I'm not saying like CZ has an agenda or is bad or whatever. I'm just saying, like, there's obviously periods where their proof of reserve wallets have changed. They've switched them up. They've commingled corporate funds and recovery funds and customer funds, and admitted to it. They said, here's $1 billion in BUSD for industry recovery, and we're like, hey, you sent that from the customer's wallets like a day ago. And their response essentially in a blog post was like, oh no, like, our internal exchange security is so good that we use corporate funds for in the same wallet. That was the response, like the PR. They tweeted this out, and I raised that up, and people were like, FUD, 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 and I'm like, guys, like, okay, it's FUD. So like, I don't have an agenda. Like, I'm just like saying, like, it's just, take control of what you own. If something bad happens, it's all entirely on yourself. Like, you signed up for this. And you were trusting someone that doesn't. How are you going to enforce responsibility if something bad happens? Not your keys, not your coins applies to even Nico. Like, you're my friend, I trust you, man. But like, if you're like, hey, I'll hold this Bitcoin for you, don't worry, I got it. I'm like, maybe I trust you, but eventually, if I don't and you scam me, then I got scammed. Like, it was my fault. And I think just there's been a lot of hard lessons, but like, not unfortunately, like, I just hope there's not more hard lessons to come. And I think at some point there will be. I'm not saying it's with, the biggest elephant in the room or not. I'm just saying, like, we've seen this stuff repeat through the history of Bitcoin. There's this ongoing process. And I unfortunately, regretfully say that the next bull run, we will see, 10x the shenanigans we saw this past bull market in terms of people losing funds, scams, phishing scams, KYC, all this crazy stuff. So maybe that's pessimistic as well, but I think we're gonna go through another cycle. It's gonna be 10x crazier. It's gonna be 10x the amount of fraud, and that's a blessing and a curse of this decentralized internet money monetizing from scratch. It's just very Darwinistic.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what was the first one? Mount Gox, right? And then it just progressively just got bigger and bigger. Last blow up, you literally have Tom Brady and Mr. Wonderful involved, and they were spokesmen for the FTX organization. So yeah, and I agree. Maybe perhaps next time a nation state will be involved. I know
nation state Ponzi. Yeah.
Like, it sounds ludicrous, but if I told you what happened this past year with the FTX stuff, if I told you about the penthouse in the Bahamas and all that stuff, and I told you about that 5 years ago, you would have laughed me out of the room. So yeah, it's definitely Wild West for sure. So I want to focus on something that you were mentioning earlier, and I think that's a very interesting topic, and that's something that I've heard from people, and I would say it's more so of a disillusionment. And what I'm talking about, Dylan, is the fact that buying the BNB token has outperformed Bitcoin. Like, even Ethereum, that wasn't the case. Ethereum still hasn't made an all-time high in Bitcoin. But if you're looking at the Binance token, it has outperformed Bitcoin, which is extremely rare, like you said. Is that due to manipulation? And of course, we're all speculating here. There's absolutely no way to know this because it's all, it's all behind the scenes. But what's your take on that? What's going on there, in your opinion?
My take on it is that there was an obvious incentive in 2021 with the Bitcoin broadly crypto, pump, where we saw $3 trillion of imaginary wealth creation, of probably just in aggregate, let's say 100, maybe $200 billion of capital inflow. That's 200 billion could be really generous. Maybe 100 billion total, maybe less than that. It could be 50 billion in raw US cash coming in to this crypto ecosystem where it got levered up, with the DeFi stuff. It got levered up as Wall Street funds tried to, cash and carry GPTC, starting at 9K, 10K, buying up 100,000, 150,000 Bitcoin. Saylor punting his corporate, not punting, but just all in his corporate treasury, buys another 100,000 Bitcoin. Relatively supply inelastic. It soars. Bitcoin goes to the moon. And the theory of alt season, right, is this pair, this trading pair of altcoin BTC and whatever this altcoin is worth. And there's really a lot of these things are intrinsically, it doesn't even matter if they have value. Like the meme coins are literally just a nihilistic financial form of gambling that's less than zero sum because the exchange takes their fees. But given the supply and elasticity of these things and the volatility, it's so illiquid, right? The bid asks are crazy wide. So a little bit of money on either side just moons the thing, right? And so altcoin outperformance is a big narrative, but in particular, if you look at like the best performers during this kind of hype phase, it was like exchange tokens, right? You saw Celsius go bonkers. You saw FTT go bonkers at the same time. Binance, trailed FTT's outperformance by a couple weeks. I might have that flipped. It might be Binance went first and FTX started going insane, but they all outperformed Bitcoin like crazy. And the smaller market caps for sure, way less capital inflow, but people only look at the percent returns. And they all of those things crashed. The correlation and illiquidity traded both ways. As volatile asset to the upside, more volatile than Bitcoin, to the downside as well. And BNB was like kind of this weird financial anomaly where it was a 200, 300 vol asset in a bull market and in a bear market, where Bitcoin is after it's kind of all settled down, Bitcoin's let's call it I don't know, 80 vol asset. BNB is just around the same. It's a little higher, but not double, not triple, like it was in the bull market. And like those things make me scratch my head. I can't know anything there, but ask yourself what the incentive is to pump your thing that you own 70 billion of. And the thing that makes me fishy is like, a smart capital allocator, if they created money, created an asset from nothing, and it within 5 years or 4 years, the thing was worth total market cap 100 billion, and you had 50 of that, and you can't unload that 50% into the market, but it would, in theory, make sense to like take some chips off the table if you were an unbiased capital allocator. And the fact that they're like, oh, we've never sold any, and we don't leverage against it. It's like, okay, then what is the point of holding it? There is no point. So if you're never going to sell it because you don't want that to impact the market to the downside, where there's no real natural buyers, right? You're the primary market maker. You're the primary liquidity. You're all the liquidity. Binance platform. You can't really sell any. So the thing that I would worry about, and the reason FTX went down, was because they were borrowed, collateralized against the solvency of the aggregate system. They were collateralized against their own exchange token. So I couldn't prove that Binance is doing that. Do I think that it's majority chance they are? I don't. I mean, I hope not. But certainly the outperformance is noteworthy, and not really noteworthy in a great way. It's noteworthy in like a very suspect way, in my opinion. So could I be wrong there? Of course. I'm not accusing them of anything, but I would encourage people to be more skeptical of the world in general. Right? These are not outrageous things to ask or post forward. It's not FUD. It's like basic due diligence. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I agree. It is kind of like this weird anomaly, right? It is strange, and then, right? What's that? It is a very famous saying, right? It's like, if you don't understand, like, just look at the incentives, and yeah, totally incentivized to manipulate it to his benefit. And I think you pointed out the the lack of liquidity is interesting if you want to sell a lot. Anyways,